If you saw a disabled boy shivering in the cold rain at night, what would you do? And what if that one bowl of hot soup you offered him could completely change your life? Would you believe it? In a world where kindness is often mistaken for weakness, today's story will make you think twice. It's about Kelly, a single mother working as a waitress in a small roadside diner, and David, a disabled boy abandoned in the freezing rain just outside. But what Kelly didn't know was, across the street, in a luxury car hidden in the shadows, David's father, a tech billionaire, was watching her every move. No introduction, no paycheck, just a small act of kindness from the heart. But that single gesture set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. Events that took Kelly from being an invisible waitress to becoming the woman who changed the HR policy of a multi-billion-dollar empire. If you believe in the power of kindness, justice, and the life-changing impact of the simplest moments, hit the subscribe button so you never miss stories like this. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary miracles begin with the smallest acts. Part 1. The rainstorm and the light at the end of the diner. That night, the rain came down in heavy sheets. Raindrops whipped through the empty street of Old Lexington like lashes from the sky. At the far end of the block stood a small diner called Luna Diner. Inside, Kelly, a brown-skinned woman with eyes that always carried a quiet warmth, was wiping away streaks of water from the time-worn glass windows. She had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift. Her legs felt like they could give out at any moment, but she never let herself snap or sigh in front of the customers. Kelly wasn't rich, wasn't famous, and didn't hold any fancy titles. But inside her was a treasure chest, filled with warmth, compassion, and the memory of her grandmother, who used to say, "Kindness doesn't need recognition, just the right moment, the right person." As she was closing up for the night, Kelly noticed a small figure huddled under the awning outside. A young boy, sitting in an old wheelchair, wearing a soaked, flimsy jacket. His cheeks were pale from the cold. Without a second thought, Kelly opened the door and rushed out into the storm, kneeling beside him. "Sweetheart, why are you out here all alone? Where are your parents?" she asked, her voice gentle as a breeze. "My dad told me to wait here. He had a meeting. He said he'd be right back," the boy whispered, his voice trembling. His bright blue eyes held an entire sky of fear and loneliness. Kelly looked around. No one. No cars parked nearby. Just the sound of the rain and the flickering neon sign of Luna Diner. "Come inside, honey. It's too cold out here," Kelly said, gently wheeling him indoors. She grabbed a dry towel, draped it over his shoulders, adjusted the heater, and quickly put together a warm meal, tomato soup and grilled cheese, her grandmother's special for rainy nights. "What's your name?" Kelly asked as she slid the bowl in front of him. "David," he murmured, but his eyes were already a little warmer. And across the street, inside a black Bentley parked discreetly in the shadows, a man watched in silence. His face was stern, his eyes razor-sharp. It was Alan, David's father, and the billionaire CEO of Sterling Innovations. He had just finished a call with the Asian Investment Board, but what he saw through the diner's window, that simple act, was something he never expected. Part 2. The Eyes in the Dark. David sat in the warm corner of the diner, his small hands wrapped tightly around the steaming bowl of soup. He ate slowly, each spoonful carrying the weight of comfort. His eyes, no longer filled with fear, now reflected a rare calm, the kind only a child used to absence and silence could understand. Kelly watched him quietly, her heart swelling with a strange, tender ache, part compassion, part sorrow. "Eat up, sweetheart. Don't worry about a thing." "Here, anyone who's hungry gets to eat," she said gently, placing her hand softly on David's shoulder like a silent embrace. David nodded, glancing up at her again. And in that instant, Kelly noticed something behind those bright blue eyes. An ache far too old for a child, and a guardedness etched deep into his young soul. What she didn't know was that across the street, in the dark, rain-speckled Bentley, Alan was still watching, motionless. The phone in his hand was silent. The meeting was over, yet his mind had never been more restless. As a man who lived in a world of power, contracts, and profit margins, he didn't believe in kindness without agenda. Everything in his life came at a price. But that woman, the brown-skinned waitress with the worn apron, was doing something none of the elites in his circle would ever do, giving without expecting anything in return. "Willow," Alan said sharply, dialing his personal assistant. "Go to Luna Diner, 20 minutes, no business attire. I want everything on the woman who just fed my son." Willow hesitated. "You mean that woman?" "Yes, name, address, background, everything. I want a full report by morning." He hung up, eyes still fixed on the window where David sat. The boy smiled, a rare smile, as Kelly gently wiped his mouth with a napkin. That smile, for some reason, made Alan's chest tighten. It was a smile he, always busy, always distant, had never seen from his own son. For the first time in years, Alan felt something slipping out of his control. A simple meal, a quiet act of kindness, had cracked open his son's heart and made him realize he might not be the one holding all the power after all. Part 3. The mysterious woman and a quiet sense of dread. The rain outside hadn't let up. Kelly was clearing plates when the diner door suddenly swung open. A woman stepped in, blonde hair tucked under a baseball cap, rain-dampened hoodie clinging to her frame, a sharp, unreadable face. She didn't say a word. Her eyes scanned the room before heading directly toward David's table. "David, let's go. Your father's waiting," she said softly, her tone trying to sound gentle. But Kelly instantly sensed something was off. David, clutching a warm glass of milk, froze. His eyes flashed with confusion. There was no joy, no relief, nothing like what you'd expect from a child being taken home. Instead, there was hesitation, fear. "Are you his aunt?" Kelly asked slowly, her eyes locked on the stranger. "Yes, Aunt Willow," the woman replied quickly, offering a forced smile. Kelly turned to David. "Is that true, sweetheart?" David hesitated. 1 second, 2, then nodded slightly. But Kelly, with the intuition of someone who had known hardship all her life, could tell the boy was lying. The room fell into a tense silence. From behind the counter, Kelly stepped forward, crouching down to David's eye level. She gently placed her hand on his frail arm. "If you feel unsafe, you can say so. No one will hurt you here." Willow's eyes narrowed, her voice rising. "I think you're crossing the line for a waitress." Kelly didn't react. She calmly reached for a cookie wrapped in wax paper and pressed it into David's hand. "Take this for the road, just in case. No one cooks for you tomorrow." David looked up at her, eyes shimmering with tears. He whispered, "You're the nicest person I've ever met." Just then, the sleek black Bentley pulled up outside the diner. Willow wheeled David out without another word. But before stepping through the door, she turned back. Her eyes were sharp, cold, like a blade. A warning. Kelly stood motionless, watching them disappear into the rain. In her chest, a heavy unease swelled, an instinctive fear she couldn't quite name. That child, in just a few fleeting moments, had left behind a quiet worry, not only because of his situation, but because of the way the world so easily stays silent in the face of truth. Part 4. The Father in the Shadows. That night, the rain had stopped, but Kelly's heart remained unsettled. After a long shift, she returned to her tiny third-floor apartment in an aging building where the walls were so thin she could hear the neighbor's TV like it was in her own living room. She didn't turn on the lights. She just sat on the couch, still in her rain-soaked waitress uniform, clutching the napkin David had used to wipe his mouth, still stained with melted cheese. Before her worry could even settle, a knock came. Sharp, cold, deliberate. Kelly walked to the door, peered through the peephole. A man stood there in a thick black coat, face stern, eyes like ice. He didn't look like any customer she'd ever served. "Miss Kelly?" he spoke, voice low, measured, and tightly controlled. "I'm Alan." Kelly hesitated. The name meant nothing to her. But his presence, the way he stood solidly in the dim hallway, like a statue of power carved into this crumbling neighborhood, triggered her instincts to stay guarded. "I don't know you," Kelly said quietly, her hand still on the partially closed door. Alan didn't flinch. "But you know my son, David." The air thickened. Kelly opened the door a little wider, just enough to see him clearly. "You're the boy's father?" Alan nodded. "Last night I was in the car. I saw everything. I saw you pull him inside, dry him off, make him a meal like he was your own child." Kelly felt a flush, not from flattery, but from the intensity of his gaze, like he was weighing her soul, heartbeat by heartbeat. "So, you came here to say thank you?" she asked cautiously. "I don't believe in kindness. I believe in justice and in debt," Alan replied curtly. He placed a thick envelope on the small table beside her. Crisp white paper, silver trim. No further explanation. "I don't take money," Kelly said, her tone suddenly sharp as steel. "Especially not from someone who thinks kindness can be bought." Alan didn't look offended. He merely smirked. "Good, because what I'm offering isn't money." He glanced around the cramped room, then turned back to face her fully. "I came to offer you a job, an invitation." Kelly stood still. In that moment, all her beliefs were put to the test. But somewhere in his eyes, those of a wealthy, guarded man, she saw something unexpected. Genuine gratitude. Not from his wallet, but from the heart of a father who had witnessed his child being treated like a human being, even in the humblest of places. Part 5. The door opens, and the challenge begins. When Kelly stepped into the headquarters of Sterling Core, it felt like she had entered an entirely different world. There was no smell of grease, no clinking of dishes, no customers complaining about late orders. Only the faint scent of expensive perfume in the cool, air-conditioned air, the rhythmic tapping of high heels on marble floors, and cold glances from people in tailored suits with every hair in place. Kelly wore an old blazer, borrowed from a neighbor. Her shoes made a soft squeak each time they touched the ground, but she held her head high. She knew exactly where she was. One wrong move, and every glance would instantly turn into claws. Alan wasn't there to greet her. Instead, a blonde woman with a razor-sharp expression introduced herself as Willow, Alan's senior executive assistant. Willow didn't smile. She didn't shake hands. She simply said, "Miss Kelly, follow me. Mr. Allen wants you to get familiar with the environment before beginning your official duties." All morning, Kelly was led through sealed-off boardrooms, where million-dollar conversations unfolded without a flicker of emotion. She was introduced to department heads, each one busy, polished, and perfectly impersonal. At one moment, Kelly caught her reflection in a frosted glass wall. A brown-skinned woman with eyes no longer wide and innocent, but sharp, alert. And when that gaze met the condescending eyes of another assistant, Kelly understood something clearly. No one here truly welcomed her. In the afternoon, Alan arrived, cold and punctual, like a clock. He handed her a file. "This is the Orbis deal. They're planning to relocate the factory overseas to cut costs. I want you to convince them to keep it here. Not for profit, but for the people behind the work." Kelly frowned. "I'm not a negotiator." Alan responded, voice calm and steady. "No. You're someone who sees what all the suits in those rooms don't. People." That sentence echoed in Kelly's mind the entire evening. Back in her small apartment, over a hot bowl of instant noodles, she thought of David, the little boy she once pulled in from the rain, trembling and alone. Now, maybe it was time for her to open another door, a bigger one, for hundreds of others like David. And to do that, she'd need to stand firm. In a world of cold handshakes and empty smiles, she would have to learn to be both soft and sharp. Part 6. Among Cold Tables. One Heart Still Warm. Kelly's first official meeting at Sterling Core was unlike any encounter she had ever experienced. The boardroom on the 33rd floor was a towering glass chamber, offering a dazzling view of a sunlit city below. But behind the glittering facade was an atmosphere heavy as lead. 3 older men sat at the head of the table. Their hair was silver, their suits custom-tailored and exorbitantly expensive, and their eyes seemed to measure Kelly's worth in units of suitability. The one in charge was Philip Langston, infamously known as the Fox of Wall Street. When Kelly walked in, he merely glanced at her, then looked back down at his file as if she didn't exist. Alan didn't sit beside her. He sat directly across, intentionally. She was meant to stand on her own, without leaning on anyone's shadow. "We're here to discuss the plan to move the factory to Malaysia," Philip began. "Low labor costs, tax incentives, there's no good reason to say no." Kelly was silent for a moment. She didn't rush to object. Instead, she opened the file she had spent all night preparing. "I understand," she said slowly, "but I'd also like to invite you to consider another report on the invisible costs." Philip raised an eyebrow. Kelly presented data not just about wages and taxes, but about worker loyalty, the erosion of company culture, and the PR crises that often erupt when major corporations are accused of abandoning domestic workers. Move the factory, and you may save a few million in 3 years, but lose public trust, and you'll lose far more over the next decade. The room fell silent. 1 second. 2. Then Philip let out a dry chuckle. "You think those sentimental arguments mean anything here?" Kelly didn't flinch. Her voice stayed gentle. "I used to wash dishes in a diner. I know what it feels like to lose a job because of a decision made on paper by someone who doesn't even know your name. But I also know the right decision can save an entire community." The room stilled again. Alan watched Kelly for a long time. He didn't smile, but for the first time, his gaze softened. And when the meeting finally adjourned, Philip was the last to leave. But before he walked out the door, he turned and quietly said, "You've made me reconsider. Not many people can do that." Kelly said nothing, but inside she knew. Today, she didn't just defend a factory. She proved herself, without raising her voice, without slamming fists, only with empathy and reason. Part 7. When trust is put to the test. 2 months in, Kelly had gradually adapted to life at Sterling Core. She no longer felt overwhelmed by the plush carpeted hallways, the high-speed elevators, or the scrutinizing glances from the financial elite. Bit by bit, she had proven she wasn't just a humanitarian token Alan had picked to appease the media. But life, unlike a financial report, rarely follows predictable lines. One crisp autumn morning, just after wrapping up a client meeting, Kelly was stopped near the elevator by Willow, the usually composed blonde woman now visibly tense. "Kelly, you need to see this." Her voice was sharp, stripped of its usual calm. Willow handed her a printed email. One glance at the subject line was all it took. Kelly's heart dropped. It was a confidential internal financial report, leaked to the press. Worse, the sender's email read, "Serena. K@sterlingcore.com. Kelly froze. The world around her seemed to shatter into stillness. The bold letters felt like a branding iron against her identity. "I didn't send it," Kelly said firmly, though her hands trembled ever so slightly. Willow nodded. "I believe you, but the board, they might not." That sentence cut deeper than any accusation. Kelly knew exactly what she was up against. A woman of color, a former waitress with no Ivy League degree. When accused in a place like Sterling Core, she wasn't presumed innocent. She had to prove it. She walked into Alan's office, for the first time, with unsteady legs. He sat behind his desk, calm as always, but his gaze was colder than usual. "Tell me, Kelly, this wasn't you, was it?" She looked him straight in the eyes. She didn't lower her head. She didn't step back. "I didn't come here for money. I came because I believed we could change the way finance treats people. And if you believe that too, then you wouldn't need to ask me that question." Alan said nothing. But for the first time, there was a flicker of emotion behind his eyes. Willow entered abruptly, urgency in her tone. "We found something. The email was sent from an anonymous VPN, but the last trace leads to one person, Alden." The room felt as though it had stopped breathing. Alden, a a senior executive with over a decade at the company, a man trusted by all, a man seen as clean. Kelly said nothing. She just looked at Alan. For the first time, he stood up, slowly fastening the buttons on his tailored blazer. "We're going to get to the bottom of this." And in that moment, Kelly understood. Trust, once tested and survived, doesn't just endure, it becomes invincible. When Kelly left the little diner that night, she never imagined that a grilled sandwich and a bowl of tomato soup would become her ticket into an entirely different world. A world of power, secrets, and politics, but also a world where kindness finally found the place it deserves. She didn't just shake up a boardroom full of billionaires with her bold, razor-sharp words. She also exposed the one who tried to frame her, using only her courage and clarity. But more importantly, she proved one timeless truth. Kindness isn't weakness. It's the force that makes even the most powerful bow their heads. And the biggest twist? The very man who once dismissed kindness as naive, the one who believed money could buy anything, handed her the keys to the company's entire global humanitarian initiative. I used to think kindness was a luxury in business. Now I see it's the most valuable asset we have. Alan, CEO of Sterling Innovations. If this story moved you, let's spread it together. Like the video so more people rediscover the value of kindness. Comment your thoughts on Kelly's actions and how they inspired you. And don't forget to subscribe, because every week we bring you stories that restore faith in humanity. Stories that are emotional, powerful, and deeply inspiring. Because sometimes, just one act of kindness can change everything.